Ultimate Avengers 2, like I said last week, came out in the same year as Ultimate Avengers 1. It's kind of like how DC released Watchmen Part 1 and Chapter 1 and Chapter 2, both in 2024. And just, gave it time to breathe. Although in the case of Watchmen, it's also a really fat story, and instead of cramming everything into one movie where we make everybody be able to take punches from Superman,
Yeah.
they split it up and let it breathe. Whereas here in Ultimate Avengers 2, this is primarily Rise of the Black Panther. So T'Challa gets his origin story. I think that my biggest surprise is how all of Wakanda seems very not modern.
Yeah.
Until far later into the movie than I would have expected. And then it's revealed, hey, secret we had it the whole time, all the tech and the big time stuff. But again, even though that reveal happens, I just thought this thing was punchy, it was fast, it wasn't dragging any time. And obviously anybody who knows Black Panther knows that T'Chaka doesn't have a long run left after you meet T'Challa, but it was done well, and it's necessary for the rise of the new hero, the younger Black Panther. And so, totally, like I said, it's predictable but understandable. And yeah, I actually, and I'm just gonna say it early, I actually gave this one a 5 out of 5 stars. I preferred it over the first, and for the reason that I actually knocked the first one, which was we didn't waste a lot of time setting up things. And now, granted, it actually benefited from the idea that all the stuff was set up in the first time.
Yeah.
So the good of that led to the great of this, in my personal view, because it's actually very similar to how and or why I loved Captain America: The Winter Soldier more than I did
the first Avenger.
First Avengers, because it set up everything up so good that when you get the big reveal, it's like, oh, cool. I knew it, and I was ready, and So oftentimes they say that, it's hard for the follow up to beat the thing that set it up, right? Yeah. Or the sophomore album, or whatever the phraseology is. But I think if you do it, if you do the work right from the start, then it makes it so much smoother to get to where you're going moving forward.
No, I will say I am the reverse. I do like the first movie a bit better. For some of the reasons, just right off the bat. Animation seems a bit more polished than the first one. Always to be expected. I don't know the production schedules, but that's just usually how it goes. And It's not even by that much. I thought the choreography was a bit more creative in the first one.
Sure.
The voice acting, I thought it was on par, the same. I loved everybody. Most of the voice cast returned. I don't think there was anybody that didn't return per se. And a pair in these movies that just stands out and I love seeing: Hank Pym and Janet.
Oh yeah. Oh my goodness.
First off, that Hank Pym is just a young Michael Douglas before Michael Douglas even knew that guy.
Exactly.
And it's not him voicing him, but you look at him and how he acts. I'm like, they probably use this to cast this guy.
Smart.
I'm assuming.
That's good. That's good thinking. I know. Well, I'll say this. I know personally, when I think about characters, and you know this, I'll visualize sometimes a person I know, and sometimes an actor or actress, because it just helps to get mannerisms, things that ticks that if you've got somebody in mind, you're like, oh, you know what, this person's got that, and I wouldn't be surprised at all if they were like, who feels good for this? Michael Douglas.
Exactly. Even if it wasn't on purpose, the guys at Marvel, especially with how much they have to keep up with, they probably looked at some of the more recent things. They were just like, wait a minute, what's that? Oh, you know what that looks like? And
Yeah.
just however the conversation
Oh, it's so
went.
good. It's so good.
Especially Jan. Like, the way that Wasp is done, like, in this movie, and then you look at, like, all the other subsequent, like, Ant-Man movies, I'm like, they had to have taken even more. Because, like, the original Wasp, she was a ditzy kind of girly girl, especially if you've seen Earth's Mightiest Heroes, that
certainly.
cartoon.
Yeah.
But this one was a lot more of the sarcastic and just more grown up portrayal.
Grown up is definitely a good way to put it. I think every character in both films, whether it be the first or the second one, they lived a life.
Yes,
and it was so obvious that they had lived a life, and yeah, that's so important to set this apart from, like you said, what has already been established in the popular culture when it comes to some of these characters. And yeah, no, I think that's a great takeaway, a really smart way to think about the characters. And like I'll say this, I tend to, and I think it's because I'm not young, I tend to think of most every character that I write as a character that's lived a very worn life. You know, they've been through some stuff, and I don't know. I just think that's a good way for people to understand that there's gravity or weight behind the story, is for the hero or the protagonist that you're reading about to have, gone through hard times.
I agree, especially with, characters, going back to, like, Wasp, like, especially in Earth's Mightiest Heroes, she seemed like a girl who is, 22, 23 years old at most, and it's just like, that's fine. But if you want heroes that have had the training, education,
I think
experience,
Batman is a great example as to why people relate or gravitate toward him, is because he's got that resume that everybody knows, where it's like, oh, you had this problem, which led to you doing this, and getting so good at everything so that you could prevent other people from going through your similar hard times. Yeah.
I think, for the same reason Batman worked, just making them a bit older to also give a more realistic time for them to accomplish the steps they need to hear. Mm-hmm. Especially Cap, when he came out the ice in the first movie, I'm like, all right, like, he's not as wet behind the ears. Like, he seemed like a more competent soldier. Mm-hmm. Bruce Banner, that dude is straight almost 50 years old. The stress they drew him in.
Oh, yeah.
And then, like, T'Challa, he came off a bit younger than everybody else.
Yeah.
But, like...
Well, I think it helped because he was the standout because of that.
Yes.
And also it explained why the elders of Wakanda thought that they could boss him around. It's like, oh, you and your outside thought processes. And it's like, guys, I've lived some life. And they're like, yeah, but we know better than you, which I thought that was funny. And then when they finally came around to the idea of the Avengers, they're actually here to help. I just set up, payoff, big fan.
I thought it was cool, especially, spoiler for anybody who hasn't seen the movie in
almost 20 years.
Yeah. But the scene where he turns into a panther.
Yeah.
Anyone who's read the Ultimate Comics, you kind of know where that's going. And, like, he has this thing where he just turns into, like, a man panther, like, hybrid, and, like, a full panther. And then I understand why they didn't go with that in the movies. But God, that is a cool power, and that would be such a cool bonus to have.
It's just it seems like that the notch above. Yeah. It's like, oh, I'm good, but if I need to be great, I got it in me.
I hope that if they decide to keep Shuri as, like, the Black Panther, or like the Black Panther's son, at the end of the Black Panther 2, if they were to find a way to make the synthetic herb, like, achieve something like that, like a pseudo panther form. I'm like, I think that would go well with the kids.
Since we're going down this what if path, I'm gonna ask a totally off Ultimate Avengers 2 question. Before I do that though, what is your score for this one?
I gave it a 4 out of 5.
Okay,
the last one I gave a 4.5 out of 5.
Awesome, perfect. So my question is this, and I keep seeing everybody. I don't know if it's film theory, what culture. Everybody's like, oh, here comes the reboot. Here comes the reboot. Secret Wars reboot, right? Frank and Richards reboot. So my question is this: if they reboot the world, the everything, who would you think would be a good T'Challa slash Black Panther? And if they reboot the universe, do you think that that next step, that additional evolution, would make for a great way to separate what was from what is?
So for the first question, I don't. There aren't many, because I would go the route of Ultimate Avengers too. Get a younger, Chadwick Boseman. He was on the younger side for the actors they were working with, but I'm talking about early 20s.
Oh wow, okay.
Maybe a guy from Africa or from like the islands, just to make it a bit authentic.
Sure.
Nothing wrong with Chadwick Boseman, rest his soul, putting on an accent, but I like authenticity.
Oh, that's funny. I didn't even know that wasn't his voice.
Yeah.
Oh, that's funny. I didn't think about that.
You hear him talking,
And
I'm like, this Southern boy.
So many people. Oh, really?
Yeah.
I had no idea. That's hilarious. So I feel the same way about Henry Cavill, right?
Yeah.
So he'll talk, and I'm like, in like in interviews, and I'm like, oh yeah, you are from England, but you see him in movies, I'm like, oh, I believe you. I didn't know. And so yeah, that's funny. I didn't know that Chadwick Boseman wasn't
actually from like Africa and
yeah,
anywhere. He does it pretty well.
Yeah, he was especially in Civil War. Like I love his mannerisms, his presentation in that film. I was just like, man, dude, if you could just show up in everybody's movie and beat somebody up, I'd be happy.
If he wasn't taken from us too soon, I can imagine him being the next, Robert Downey Jr. Where he's just everywhere, just
important.
God, man. But he went out on his own terms with a great role.
And I love that, or I admire the idea that he, even while going through hard times himself, always wanted to lift the spirits of others.
Exactly.
Like I literally saw this post where he was in a cancer ward, helping lift the spirits of kids, and they didn't even know that he was going through the same fight. And I was like, wow, that speaks a lot about the heart of the man.
The real life heroics, definitely.
Yeah, and I actually think you're probably right, because it to me it's the Christopher Reeve concept where you cast an unknown young so that you can keep them in the role, and so that kind of negates the first question, since if we're gonna start young and keep them around.
Oh yeah.
And so I guess we'll just move to the secondary question. What do you think about that the evolutionary or the extra emphasis on the Black Panther power? You think that would work in a live action setting?
I think it would. It had to be something he'd earned. It had to be a second movie or something he culminates to. Because if you want to do the origin story for a younger guy,
sure,
you can't end the first movie with him getting that power. It has to come somewhere else. Maybe another Avengers level event.
Yeah,
but that's something that you definitely got to save. So.
Oh, you know what? It just Marvel ain't asked me to do nothing, but it just made me think about how Thor had to go get the new hammer forged to go take the fight on. And so like you said about going to the elders and getting the herb and the whatever and unlocking that power, maybe that's the way that you get to the big climax of some massive event. Yeah, so that would, anyway, I don't know, just off topic but fun.
I will say, part of me, if they decide to do like a reboot, Secret Wars, whatever, which I don't imagine they really have to, but if people are getting older, it's not comic books, I get that.
Oh yeah.
I think they would commit to a whole reboot.
Yes, absolutely.
Just because, unlike DC, they have the luxury of doing that.
Yeah.
Besides, like, there are other universes here, they haven't been reboot heavy.
So there's this meme that I saw that I'll try my best to find, but it cracked me up. So it was this old, like, I'm going to say probably 1960s, 1970s drawing of Tony Stark. And then a picture of Pedro Pascal. And they're like, somebody missed the boat not casting this guy as Tony Stark because, he had the thin facial hair. He had the, like, just everything about Pedro's look was like,
he looks like Demon in a bottle cover Iron Man.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
Oh, it was, it cracked me up.
One thing I will say that I like with the Fantastic Four, that if they were to do a reboot, I think they should take advantage of. That's how a lot of it takes place in the 60s.
Yep.
There's some shenanigans about whether or not they lose or go to another world. This ain't the video for that.
Of course.
There's a stream that they go in depth if you want to check that out. What was the stream? The 4-man stream.
Oh, yeah. That was World Class Bullshitters, and, I mean, Fantastic Four is the thumbnail, so it's very obvious what we were talking about.
But I also think that do more period pieces like, oh, Spider-Man, he's this young guy, he's the apprentice for Iron Man. I always thought, make him start out in the 60s or 70s, just like it did.
Yeah.
And then he's the seasoned hero that when the Avengers come on and everything like that, they're just like, well, wait, you're the guy from back then.
Yep.
You can have his story, because Spider-Man, his stories are so big that you can't have him doing this Avengers stuff, and that, like, you have to separate it at least a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that having a group of heroes being this time period, then a group of heroes being this time period, then the modern day, with some of them coming back, so like, I think that would be way better. It's a more diverse flavor of films.
Absolutely. And it sets it apart from what was.
Exactly.
Yeah. And speaking of setting things apart, as you can see, Aaron is wearing the BC Brute shirt. Today is the final full day of the campaign on Indiegogo. If you are seeing this when it drops live, or when it first drops, go follow the link in the description. Go to Indiegogo, back the book. It's only $5. It is beautiful. It pops off the page. He did such great work. Everybody contributing to the book was so amazing. Whether it be colors, letters, all of it just made the story come to life. I appreciate you, sir. Thank you so much. So, whether or not the goal is met, the books are getting shipped because they're done. But the thing is that if the goal on Indiegogo is met, that means that, well, in my mind, I consider it a success because it means that I earn back my investment. But like I said, with or without that part, you're still getting the book because I never announce a project without and say, hey, spend your money without it being finished. I just feel like that's the right way to do things. Because there are creators out there like, oh, I have an idea, pay for my idea. No, we have product that we want you to have and enjoy.
There's been a year's worth of work before he even approached anything with, the Indiegogo. And, like, by the time you guys knew anything about Indiegogo, we were just waiting on letters. Like,
I know,
it's
right?
done now.
I love it.
It will come to fruition, so share it with your mom, your
Oh,
dad,
here's the crazy
kids,
thing,
anybody.
dude.
So,
Literally, now that the lettered pages are in, the only thing left is to send it off to the printer. And so I have this friend. Actually, I'm just going to talk to him about this off screen.
Ah.